we're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's Friday, December 8th here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, filling in for Shin Yoon, and you're watching News Generation. Joining me in the studio is Cheska Dainha.
Happy Friday, everyone!
Happy Friday! And Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. Now, as usual, we're going to begin with the news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Starting in Korea, there is a growing concern about smishing, a term used for phishing through text messages. According to the Ulsan Metropolitan Police, a civil servant's phone sent a message to 200 of his acquaintances on Tuesday that his father passed away. The message included a URL containing a malicious code. Now, this technique is referred to as the zombie phone method in Korea. It involves infecting one's cell phone with a virus, which then sends text to numbers in that person's phone book. Clicking on the link could result in unauthorized transactions from your bank account. Now, shifting our focus to Thailand, the Songkran Festival has been recognized as a UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage. The announcement was made at the Intergovernmental Committee meeting for Safeguarding Intangible Cultural Heritage in Botswana on Wednesday. This comes more than 3 years after the Thai government initially submitted the application. The Songkran Festival, a traditional Thai New Year celebration, involves nationwide celebrations from April 13th to 15th every year. Now, back here in Korea, how would you feel if your upstairs or downstairs neighbor decided to cook meat on the veranda? A recently uploaded photo on an online community has sparked a heated debate among users. The image shows the uploader grilling meat in what appears to be a veranda-like space. Now, some argue that this action is inconsiderate because the smell could go upstairs, while others argue it's not a big deal. So here in the studio, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on this matter or this photo?
First of all, looking at that VCR made me extremely hungry.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, it looks so good. But to be honestly, from my point of view, I don't think it's actually a bad thing because I'm at home, and to be honest with you, the smell of cooking doesn't bother me at all, and if anything, it kind of entices me to eat more.
Yeah, it gives
which
you
is
inspiration
maybe,
sometimes.
Exactly, which may be actually more of a bad thing because then I feel hungry, even if I've already ate. But I can imagine there are more, I guess, serious situations where it might disrupt neighbors. For example, the last apartment that I lived in, they had smokers living, let's say, on very high floors, and they would throw their cigarette butts out of the windows, which would land on the veranda. Now, that's the sort of thing that I wouldn't tolerate. But when it comes to cooking, I mean, that's not their. It's really not a big deal in my opinion. You can always shut the window, and until the cooking's over. I mean, when you cook, most likely the person upstairs is going to smell your cooking as well. So it's not that big of a deal in my opinion.
Yeah, but if that smell kind of gets your fresh laundry, I think that's some of the reasons why some are saying that this could be a problem. Now, what are your thoughts, Cheska?
I agree with you, Eugene. I think I can provide a little bit more different opinion. But this is certainly a tricky issue because much like the noise controversy that happens between floors in the apartment, you know, I think given the setting of your home, whether it be a metropolitan apartment where ventilation or sound isn't as well done as some European villas, I think people do get very, very sensitive and the tolerance rate kind of goes down when these things happen. And especially if you're grilling something in a Korean apartment veranda, you know, the kimchi smells and the grill, which is delicious. I know, I know Walter is extremely excited. But it is a bit annoying when the smell kind of gets into your house. And just like what he said, especially the smoking too. I know there are smokers who smoke in the bathroom and they open the vents and actually travels through the pipe all throughout the apartment. So even my villas, they always have announcements about that. So I can understand why some people are frustrated and this kind of controversy goes on in apartments.
Right, hope this uploader and his neighbor settles down peacefully. All right, that was our news feed for this Friday. We're now going to move on to our main discussion topic of the day. Today, we're going to explore a type of phobia that might not be as widely recognized as arachnophobia or aerophobia. So have you ever heard of tourism-phobia? If you haven't, let's tune in to my AI voice secretary.
Have you ever thought of what it would be like to live in an iconic tourist destination like Venice or Santorini? Residents often find themselves grappling with an overwhelming number of tourists, especially during the holiday and vacation periods. This has given rise to what is known as tourism-phobia, which refers to the fear, aversion, and social discomfort experienced by these residents towards tourists. In some regions, the sentiment has escalated to the point where residents have initiated anti-tourist protests.
Also, I can't help but feel that this phobia is becoming a more pressing issue these days, especially with the recovery in the number of tourists this year after COVID. And it seems like this has become a growing concern for a lot of tourist spots here in Korea.
It's very true. And I think post-COVID, both domestic and international people have been traveling a lot more and a lot more frequently, obviously, because I think everyone has been dying.
Yeah, we've been waiting so much.
I know, dying to book that ticket and just leave, right? We have reported a number of incidents where tickets have been overbooked and people are crowded in the airport. So obviously, in a very high popular tourist cities and sites, overcrowding, over-tourism has become a malaise. Like in Korea, there is 북촌한옥마을 village, very popular among tourists and very beautiful, right? And this area has expressed extreme discomfort because of the tourists. And just to give you the number of how escalated the situation is, according to the stats released from Korea Culture and Tourism Institute, in just the last 2 years, foreign travelers has increased to about 400%.
400%?
400. So just to give you a clear number, the number jumped from about less than 1 million, about 960,000, to 5.5 million this year.
Almost 6 times.
Yep. So you can imagine how crowded some places would be if you imagine 5.5 million people traveling in very specific tourist sites in Korea.
And I exactly understand why this problem is becoming bigger, because now these tourist spots were already packed with tourists, but now with the recovery in the number of tourists, we're continuing to see more of them, which is causing a headache, right?
That's correct, yes. And this actually really does heavily link to our generation. Now, think about our generation. What do we think about? We think of social media. We think of getting that pic for Instagram. Exactly. Social media is the best form of advertising. I mean, it's free advertising for tourist companies. It's free advertising for restaurants, etc. So once something goes viral, and very often things do, people flock to that restaurant. People flock to that area. It's just the way our generation is now, going through the motions. But this phobia isn't just amongst international travelers going to other countries, but also domestic travelers. So for example, Koreans who are traveling within Korea, they, especially in like the place like Jeju-do, Jeju-do, or Jeju Island, sorry, is one of the biggest holiday places if you just want to travel domestically here in South Korea. I know I love going there. It's one of my favorite places. And I've actually felt maybe like I've experienced this sort of tourism phobia before, because I went to a Muna ramen place, which is an octopus ramen place, seafood octopus ramen restaurant with my wife. And I was not treated in the best way along with my wife. We were put at the back of the restaurant, and I noticed that the restaurant wasn't exactly full, and the waitress was not the nicest to us. Now, this may be because that my wife had a very strong Seoul accent compared to the Jeju accent, or she might have just been having a bad day. I hope it was the latter. However, yes, I can imagine these are the sorts of behaviors that are coming across to tourists as well. So even though overcrowding is bad, it can also affect tourists coming into Korea.
Absolutely.
Right. So you mentioned your example kind of shows one of the symptoms or traits, common traits of tourism phobia. So let's delve a bit deeper into this phenomenon. So what factors contribute to local residents actually suffering from social media, tourism phobia, for example? What kind of attitudes of the tourists?
We have to be a little bit generous, because some of the behaviors are actually begotten purely by ignorance, not all, but some, as in they actually don't know that this is a residential area, and this is they're unaware of the situations that some people in, so they take photos in front of these houses and create noises, even peering in and looking into the houses against the privacy of the residents.
Right, definitely.
As you all may know, trashing is always a huge issue for any of these popular sites and places that humans tread, and I guess some even ask the residents if they could use use the restroom. I do not know how it passed, but they did. And if you've been here, Walter and Eugene, the streets are extremely narrow.
Like alleyways.
And steep. So imagine if you have a constant flow of crowd going back and forth, your only alley for you to get down. I mean, it can cause a lot of commuting issues for the residents, and illegal parking, safety issues. I mean, the list really goes on.
Right.
But I also want to say, before placing the blame solely on the tourist, we also have to be mindful that there should be rules, regulations, and policies implemented to protect the residents and also provide the travelers with a better experience.
I definitely agree. And we talked about 북촌한옥 village, which is located in Seoul, but I heard that there is tourism-phobia going on in other tourist spots in the country as well.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, Jeju Island is one of those places, and it turns out that like tourists are disposing more and more waste as, you know, especially during the COVID period time where we couldn't really go outside the country. Jeju became a real hotspot for Korean tourists, and
Almost like an escapade, right? Some place to escape.
Yeah.
Exactly. So like more waste for hotels, more waste for stay houses. As you can see, like Jeju is never not busy. Like even in the winter time, it's still not busy,
That's
right?
a good one, yeah.
This has caused the government to even try to introduce a controversial entrance tax just to get in. And as we can see here, this is Yosu, I believe. Yosu is very well known for its Nangman Pocha, which are street food vendors, a very popular destination for MZers. Now this street is flooded with tourists, and there's also Hanok Village. But all these places that I've just mentioned usually have tons and tons of people on a weekly basis, not even just on the weekend, but also on the weekdays, because a lot of people think the best time to go to these places is during the weekdays, but everyone has the same idea.
They
so
all
7 days a week. Yeah.
Right. 7 days, 24/7.
Yeah, imagine being a person who lives in one of those places and constantly someone's walking past your house.
I wouldn't want to imagine it. So we now talked about Korea, but to expand our discussion, what's the situation like in other parts of the world? Because I remember a few years ago reading news reports, news articles about like these anti-tourism sentiment, tourism-phobia, some even initiating protests in European cities.
You know, I think over-tourism can cause huge malaise to the residents in the areas if not properly managed. Just to give you an example, I lived in Manhattan for the longest time, and even if it took extra time or extra footing, I would try to avoid Times Square at all costs. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one. And I think one thing I thought America did really well in my personal experience was the strong enforcement of regulations. They would have very strict hours for going to the museums or even going to certain cities, and they would create passes to control people in certain locations. And I think, Walter, you would be happy to tell us more, but Europe has been seriously ill with times over tourism and have started putting on bans, taxes, and fines. And there was a French startup called Murmuration, which sort of monitors the environmental impact of tourism by using satellite data. And they actually stated that 80%, imagine the 80% of all the travelers, they congregate in just 10% of very specific world location, meaning bigger crowds and fewer spots, and these locations never getting a break from people coming in and coming out. So just imagine how exhausted that city or that nature would be.
Right. And now turning to you, Walter, you will be able to tell us about what countermeasures Europe has been taking.
Yeah, so obviously Europe is one of the biggest destinations when it comes to traveling. Everyone wants to go because everything is so close. You don't have to fly for very long once you get there. And I know for countries like Rome and Spain, they are massive tourist destinations, right? Everyone wants to go to Spain or Rome. And one of the many things people like to do is go sit on the stairs of Rome or sit on the stairs of Spain, which has
have a macaron and have a wine.
Exactly, and just be very French-like or whatever, or Spanish-like. But the reason why is because the background is beautiful. They can take again, comes back to social media. They can take all these photos. However, like Cheska mentioned, if you're putting 80% of the population into this 10% of the area, imagine how many people that would be, and it wouldn't be a great photo, to be honest with you. Have you ever seen that picture of like everyone at the Leaning Tower of Pisa doing this? and like when you see everyone else doing it, it looks strange.
You can always see the people.
This is another example of over-tourism. I think there's so many people. And another example, in France, the Louvre Museum, they actually have now time limits of how long you can be in there. So if you're going to see the Mona Lisa, it's best to run to that place first, admire it for the time being, and save the other things for later.
Right. So a lot of problems are arising. For example, congestion, littering, and many more. And we also asked our viewers whether they live in a tourist area, and if so, are there any discomforts? Now, here's what 3 of them had to say. So looking at the comments, Hannah says, within a 20-minute walk from my home, you'll find the majestic Tokyo Skytree. While the tower attracts a large number of tourists, especially on weekends and during holidays, there's nothing particularly uncomfortable around where I live. I'm grateful to have such a stunning landmark in my neighborhood. Reese Alex says, I live in a pilgrimage area in the Philippines, and the influx of tourists and visitors during certain times of the year can be a source of irritation. There is heavy traffic and large crowds that disrupt the regular rhythm of everyday life and can be such a hassle in terms of pollution, trash, as well as health and safety issues. Giselle says, I lived very close to a tourist area for about 5 years. The negative is the crowdedness, along with people walking very slow as they take in all the famous sights around them. So some of our viewers said that they have experienced inconveniences, while some say they haven't. I think that the opinion kind of divides because not all tourist areas have the same conditions. Some areas can be really big and some areas can be really condensed, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely. So now to expand our discussion, we're going to include a young person living in a tourist spot in our talks. We'll be right back, so stay tuned. So joining us today is Dana Dempsey, a Gen Z living in Cairo agent. Welcome, Dana, to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Now, we've been talking about this all day, but is your neighborhood often crowded with tourists? And if so, have you encountered any inconveniences due to the presence of tourists in your area?
First of all, I just want to say that I actually visited Seoul earlier this year, so I'm sorry if I contributed to the chaos. However, I never asked a neighbor to use their bathroom, so I hope that helps. Yeah, I actually live in Cairo, so there are quite a lot of tourists often, but because it's such a large city and the tourist sites are quite isolated, I don't often see them or feel their presence.
You know, there's a common notion that residents who live near or around the tourist spots don't often visit these spots themselves. And as I said, when I lived in Manhattan, I was trying to avoid Times Square at all costs. Is this true in your experience?
Oh, definitely. I would say most of my Egyptian friends hadn't visited the pyramids until they were in their late teens to early 20s. I mean, it's right in the middle of the city, so you do drive past it when you're getting to certain places, so it's nothing new to them. And I think the convenience of having it right there just makes them less motivated to go see it up close.
I'm so glad that obviously you don't have the experience of having tourists going past your house all the time or taking photos or asking to use your bathroom. I hope you wouldn't ask people to, you wouldn't let people in and use your bathroom. You might be a very nice person, but I know I wouldn't be.
I wouldn't either.
But from your perspective, what measures would you like to see your government take to address the inconvenience? You said you haven't had personal experiences, but at least what you know of that can affect other people.
Honestly, in terms of inconvenience, I would say just the biggest one is they keep building things closer and closer to the pyramids. And I think that leaving an open space around it is a really good idea because it's such obviously a sacred place.
Right.
And it's beautiful with the desert surrounding it. So the more buildings come in closer, I think the more the beauty is disrupted. So if I could ask for one thing, that's what I would ask for.
All right. Thank you, Dana, so much for your valuable insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
So Dana gave us like a really valuable, good solution, and I want to bring the discussion back here in the studio. So in your opinion, like we've been talking about tourism phobia and how Korea is grappling with it.
Yes.
So any suggestions for the Korean government or local government so that they could alleviate these concerns and headaches of the locals?
I mean, I hope they watch our news because we have some 2 cents of ours to give. But just like people, I think the environmental really and perhaps quite desperately needs time to recuperate. And we've seen it during the COVID times. If people just take a little bit of backseat, the nature has incredible power to, you know, regenerate and then come back. So what I suggest, and I did this in another episode, is called city vacation. And I know Walter thinks it's something else. But
I think it's like you're just bringing more people to the city.
It's like vacation, come. No, it's actually for city to take a vacation, where these popular cities take, you know, temporary restrictions and not have tourists coming in. So the city also has time to prepare and accept better business and better people and provide better settings for the tourists. Now, another thing that I can think of is safety. That is, I think, always a grave concern.
Right.
So for both the residents and the travelers. So if traveling is just a wonderful way to meet people and to become educated, so I do hope that they implement regulations and rules to make sure that everyone has a safe and good experience.
Right. It's important that everyone, including the locals and tourists, all have a pleasant experience, right? Now, what do you want to add, Walter?
Well, I'm going to go from the perspective of being now a local here in Korea and my experiences from what I see as tourists. Not so much the regulations, but what we expect from our tourists.
Yes.
So that's the subject of tourist behavior. Now, people are so excited, including myself, when we go on holiday that after we've packed our bags, we tend to forget to pack our manners.
Oh, that's such a good line.
Make sure while you are packing your bags to also remember what manners you need while going to the country. Maybe look out for some cultural background information on countries. What's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Now, what I've seen here in Korea, and you've probably seen it if you've lived here in Korea as well, is certain tourists walking around drinking alcohol on the streets. Now, that's not uncommon for Koreans, and what I'm saying is you will see Koreans at parks, maybe in like on the convenience stores having a drink. That's fine. I'm talking about those people who walk around with bottles of soju, which is, I might remind you, hard liquor, and walk around and drink it and leave it on the side of the road or whatever.
Just chugging it and then trashing it, right?
Exactly. It's not meant for that. Respect the customs, respect the traditions, and that's what I do before I go to any other country. I make sure I know a little bit about the background. I know the do's and don'ts, and it's not like that isn't available for you. As we mentioned, we are the
social media
generation, right? We are the ones who have access to more information about other countries than any other generation. So it's not hard for you to be able to, you know, just quickly go on social media, check out some social media do's and don'ts, and therefore go to the country. That's what I would like to see anyway.
So very great advice. City vacation, being respectful.
A little bit more angry from Walter, but still good.
It's not anger yet.
It was great advice. All for sustainable tourism. All right, that's all we have for today, but we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Cheska Deinho.
Pleasure's always mine. Thank you.
And Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
Thank you everyone for watching. Have a great weekend and we'll see you on Monday. We are News Generation.